I've been asked to give some tips for teaching online, and I've been teaching online for 5 years, every semester and during summer school and winter term. So the most important thing is to write engaging lectures and have a lot of illustrations in there, and that would be pictures and drawings and examples. And check the links. If you have hyperlinks to anything in your lecture, make sure that you check them because they go away and you don't want to lose them. If you've made a video of yourself talking, you can upload it on YouTube or Google Videos, make an account there, and that's the discount way of doing it. And then you can also buy yourself a cheap video camera, and I would suggest using the Flip Video, and that's like the max you'll pay for that is $179. And the editing works well with Windows Movie Maker. It's pretty simple, and if you need some help doing that, I'll be happy to help you. And so install in your course more than one grading opportunity a week. In my case, I usually have a discussion board, 2 discussion boards doing 2 different things. And in my chemistry course I have a quiz. It's just a 10-question quiz, just so that they have a deadline and they can't let things go, just like in regular class, and that you're in touch with them. And you know if they're not keeping in touch. So that's more of the preparation. Also, there's a thing called United Streaming, and they have a lot of good videos. They're proprietary, so we have to have permission to use those. Now, when you're running the class, make sure that you put the current week's work on top, the first thing in the course documents, so they don't have to scroll down through all your stuff to find it. Don't make it difficult for them. And also set deadlines for all the assignments, and don't be lax about them. Actually, if you say you're going to take off a certain amount of points, take off a certain amount of points, because otherwise they'll just take advantage of you. And in what I've found is in the discussion boards I have certain word counts, and they can go plus or minus 5 words. So if I say make a summary of the New York Times articles on environmental article this week in 150 words, they'll get 20 points off if they go 5 words above or below. And this has some benefits because it forces them to do the creation of this in Word and then check for their grammar and spelling, and also do the word count. So learning how to make their writing more succinct is really, you're helping them. And you're helping yourself, because then you don't have to read a lot of drivel. And enforce the spelling, grammar, punctuation rules, and help them learn how to write better. Take points off. And another thing is open book test. I have open book tests, but I time them all. And that way, if you have enough questions, they can't look everything up. If they don't know where things are in the book because they haven't read the book and they haven't read the lecture, they won't find it in the time limits that you impose. Very important part of open book testing. Now, this is about keeping in touch with your students. Again, if you have discussion boards, keep the current discussion board on top. They're numbered. When you go into course documents or even to the discussion board, the teacher has the ability to number them. If they have to scroll down, you're not going to keep them engaged. So when they have the introduction email, the introduction discussion board, which most people do, email each student privately. Don't say hi on the discussion board, because that leads to a lot of drivel. Drivel and blather are something that you should really keep away from, because it just distracts, and you don't want the tone to be reduced. Check your email often, and make sure that they know to check their email often. Have their emails directed. And it's a really good idea to get hold of their private email. You can find it, but ask them. I think a good idea is to ask them for their private email, because if Blackboard goes down, you might want to send out a mass email from your non-PACE account and tell them, you know, what are the alternative technologies you're going to use to keep in touch. So you can make comments on the discussion board to what the students are saying, but only when absolutely necessary, or when they address you or ask you for a question. And I keep a separate discussion board for other comments, and I do keep an eye on that a couple of times a day to see if somebody has a question that they won't email me, they ask other people. Also, don't post anything as a response to a discussion board that might embarrass a student. Send them an email, but you have to, you know, word it very carefully. If they said something, and suggest that they take something off the discussion board. You can also take it off yourself and send them an email if they're saying something that might be embarrassing to themselves or to other people. So, and to kind of sum it up, a successful online class requires a lot of discipline by the students, but also discipline by you. And you have to be engaged. And if you're engaged, the students feel it and they become more engaged. So it's really no different from an in-person class, but it's just a different way of doing it. And you can get in touch with me if you have any questions.
I'm Marilyn Weigel, Professor of History and University Historian at Pace University's Pleasantville, Westchester County, New York campus. And for slightly more than a decade, I have had the privilege of teaching online. My most popular course is Wealth and the American Culture, which deals with the accumulation and utilization of great American fortunes. And what I have learned in a little more than a decade of teaching online is that it is essential to get the students involved from the very beginning. And I learned from a knowledgeable colleague that one way to do that, in addition to the usual icebreaker type exercise, which I call getting to know you, in addition to that, we have groups, and those groups are created very, very early. And students are expected to interact with one another, and I am constantly, quote unquote, looking over their shoulders and commenting, sometimes only adding a few words of encouragement, sometimes, however, helping to redirect the discussion if a student perhaps has gone off on a tangent. But I think that professorial involvement is very, very important. And for those online faculty who feel comfortable with the idea, it is not inadvisable to provide one's students with home telephone numbers. In my decades of teaching, I have never had a bad experience when I've given out home phone numbers. Students usually call only when they really need your help. And quite frankly, in our 24/7 environment, in which students are often working in addition to going to school, it is very helpful if they have my number, can contact me even on the weekend to discuss research papers, for example. I guess the bottom line for me, in terms of trying to create a very, very positive course experience for the undergraduates, has been not only getting the students involved and keeping them involved throughout the course, but also being available to them. Students really are most appreciative when they know that a faculty member is approachable, and it really has worked out quite well for me.
I'm Stephen Goldleaf. I'm an English professor, and I've been doing online courses for several years. And probably the one thing that I have the hardest time mastering, and that I recommend very strongly, is that when you teach an online course, you start out by putting the students on notice that this is going to be a lot of commitment in terms of time, because they're used to the time they spend in the classroom being time that they can zone out and text their friends and do other things. So they're kind of looking at those 3 hours as partly, social time. And the online class, you're basically saying to them, this is 3 hours. I want you to be writing for every minute of those 3 hours, because that's the only way I get to see your participation in the class. So you sort of need to, in other words, reach out to the motivated students. You need to tell them, you need to be really a self-starter to make this class work. And if you're a passive student, if you are thinking this is going to be a class where you can just show up and things will be done for you, that's not going to work. So you'll need to rethink that. And that's what my number one tip is for teaching online classes.